The perpetrators had knocked the officer to the ground. They had no idea that 23 dogs were silently observing them. He lay motionless in the snow. The young policeman was barely breathing. Blood on his temple darkened in the frost. 3 criminals stood behind him, convinced the job was done. But there was one thing they didn't know. In the silence of the forest, amidst the white haze, 23 German shepherds were already watching them, silent, waiting, and choosing their moment. Snow crunched under the criminals' boots, but their footsteps gradually faded away. The young policeman, André, lay still, sprawled on his back in the snow. His breathing barely raised his chest. The frost bit into his skin, burning away the remnants of warmth. The blood on his temple had managed to freeze into a thin crust. It seemed to him that the world had become muffled. A buzzing in his ears drowned out all sounds, until suddenly a sensation of being watched appeared, as if the dark forest was looking at him. Out of the white silence emerged the first silhouette, a German shepherd. Then a second, a 10th, the 23rd. The dogs moved soundlessly, as if they knew that danger might be nearby. They surrounded André in a tight ring, analyzing every detail, his scent, his wound, his breathing. In the distance, a car door slammed dully. The criminals hadn't left yet, and the dogs understood this. André tried to inhale too sharply, it was too painful. His body responded with an agonizing spasm. His lungs seemed glued together by the cold. He wanted to raise his hand, to touch the snow with his fingers at least, but his muscles wouldn't obey. The dogs drew closer. A large male dog, standing at his feet, lowered his muzzle and carefully sniffed the cold fabric of his uniform trousers. Another, slightly smaller, walked around the left side, standing close. They didn't bark, didn't growl, only looked at André, at the forest, at the tracks that led to the enemy's dark SUV. 3 men stood behind the car, discussing what to do next. Their voices drifted over, muffled. "He shouldn't live. We'll come back to check later. Load the boxes quickly." The dogs went still. Their ears stretched tensely forward. Their backs arched slightly. The snow under their paws still hadn't betrayed their presence. André wanted to warn them, to whisper at least something, but his frozen tongue barely moved. The dog at his head lowered itself further and touched his cheek with warm breath, as if saying, "We are here, don't be afraid." A moment later, the entire pack turned their heads in one direction, toward the criminals who decided to return to check the body. Through their humming in his head, André heard the crunch of steps, fast, angry. The criminals were approaching. He saw only blurred spots of their silhouettes, but the dogs saw everything clearly. The pack didn't move, as if frozen in expectation of a command that no one gave. It knew itself what to do. The first to react was the largest dog, the one standing behind André's legs. He tensed up. His tail stretched into a line. The fur on his withers rose. One short exhale, a barely audible snort, and the whole pack understood the signal. But they were still waiting. The criminals came closer. André distinguished voices. "Check the pulse. Just in case. He's already a corpse." "Fine, but the boss said to make sure." They switched to a cautious walk, as if sensing that something had changed in the air. One of them frowned. "Stop. There are more tracks." "What other tracks?" The silence thickened. The dogs didn't make a sound, but the tension between them could be felt almost physically. The man in the red shirt took a step forward, squinting. "There are eyes, what else?" He didn't finish speaking. From the shadows between the trees, dozens of gleams flashed simultaneously, the eyes of 23 dogs reflecting the winter light. The criminals instinctively backed away. "What the? Where are they from?" The same large dog stepped forward, not growling, not showing teeth, simply demonstrating. "You cannot go further." The men wanted to raise their weapons, but didn't have time. The pack lunged forward. But not chaotically, with incredible precision. 2 dogs knocked one criminal off his feet, others blocked the hands of the second. The third man found himself pinned to the car, not even understanding how quickly they had moved. Barking tore through the air, not furious, but warning. They didn't attack to kill, they simply stopped the evil. Andrei, barely regaining consciousness, realized these weren't random dogs. They knew what they were doing. They had been trained once, but by whom? The pack held the criminals under siege. They lay in the snow, shocked. The bewildered men didn't understand that they were attacked neither by wolves nor wild beasts, but by German shepherds acting more precisely than many special forces units. One of the men tried to move, but a dog instantly loomed over his arm, pressing the weapon to the snow with a paw. The second, pinned near the car, was trembling so much that steam burst from his mouth in jerks. "What is this even?" he exhaled. "Whose are they?" There was no answer. Only the heavy breathing of the dogs and the quiet winter wind. Andrei at this time was slowly returning to consciousness. The warmth from the dogs lying nearby helped to preserve life at least a little. One of the dogs lay sideways against his shoulder, as if warming him intentionally. Another licked the wound on his temple, gently, almost professionally. Andrei tried to open his eyes wider, saw the uniform he was dressed in. He remembered his last words on the radio, remembered the blow to the head, and remembered the people he was supposed to help. He tried to rise, but the world spun. The dogs reacted immediately. One put its muzzle on his chest, soft but insistent, not letting him get up. "Lie down," he read in their movements, as if they spoke an old familiar language. But why? Meanwhile, panic began by the car. "We can't lie here forever," one criminal shouted. "Don't move, idiot," another hissed. "They are crazy." The pack didn't move, but watched every motion. Their restraint only intensified the men's terror. After a few minutes, a sound appeared, distant, barely audible, a siren's wail or the wind. The criminals fidgeted. "It's the police." But how? He didn't have time to call for backup. Maybe someone saw. Andrei heard these words through the fog of consciousness. Something inside him stirred. Perhaps he had a chance to survive, but his gaze fell on the dogs again. They looked toward the road, waiting, listening. The world seemed to split into two lines. There, where he lay, weak, exhausted, barely alive. And there, where they stood, 23 defenders who made the decision to fight. Suddenly the large dog, the one that first came out to Andrei, turned his head. His gaze lingered on the policeman's face. In those dark eyes was something human, almost familiar. Andrei drew in a trembling, painful breath. "You," he exhaled, barely audibly, as if forgotten knowledge flared up inside him, a thin image, almost a memory. He knew this look once long ago. But how? At that moment, as if on command, the pack repositioned. All the dogs lined up in a semicircle before the criminals, leaving a few near Andrei. And just then, the real sound of engines was heard from behind the trees. Andrei fell back into darkness, but with a final thought, "They saved me and are holding the line to the end." The sound of engines grew louder. First muffled, as if through a thickness of snow, then distinctly. Several vehicles were approaching along the forest road. The wind carried now a phrase, now a scrap of a voice. These were not criminals, this was not the villain's backup, this was the police. The dogs heard them earlier than any human. 3 shepherds raised their heads almost simultaneously. Ears tensed, tails twitched slightly, but they didn't rush to meet the sound. They waited for the main sign from the leader, and the leader approached Andrei. He was barely holding on the edge of consciousness, but the dog quietly nudged his nose into his cheek, as if asking, "Are you holding on?" "We are here." Headlights cut through the fog and snow. The cars stopped abruptly. Someone saw the scene's participants sooner than expected. "God, what is that?" "Don't come closer." It's shepherds." The first police officers got out of the cars. Flashlights snatched chaotic shadows from the trees, and gradually they saw everything. 3 criminals knocked into the snow, an SUV with open doors, and a pack of 23 German shepherds standing like a wall in front of them. "Weapons down," someone shouted. The dogs reacted instantly with tension, but not aggression. Not a single one growled, nor rushed forward, they simply held the defense. And then one of the officers noticed Andre. "There's a man there, it's ours, alive." 3 policemen moved toward him, but the pack let only one through. The one who moved slower than the rest, didn't make sharp movements, and spoke in a low, calm voice, "Easy, quiet, guys, we are friends." The dogs allowed him to approach Andre only within a meter, but that was enough. "There is a pulse, cold as ice, but breathing. We need to take him," someone yelled from behind. But the pack didn't move. They didn't intend to leave. And then the policeman standing closest did something no one expected. Slowly took off his glove, extended his hand to the leader, palm down. The dog sniffed the air, then the hand, the thin frosty scent of skin. He remembered, once long ago, such gestures meant trust. It was this thin connection that allowed the incredible to happen. The pack reluctantly retreated, giving the medics access to Andre. The orderlies, working in a feverish rhythm, wrapped him in thermal blankets and applied a splint to his arm. Pressure is dropping. Severe hypothermia. Faster to the car. They lifted Andre onto the stretcher carefully, cautiously. And at that moment the pack emitted a low, drawn-out sound, not aggression, but anxiety. The large dog approached the stretcher and once again nudged his muzzle into Andre's shoulder. A farewell, a blessing, a promise. No one knew, but everyone felt it. The police cautiously parted, letting the pack through, which, like one living body, retreated toward the forest. The leader stood last. He looked at the people, then toward the criminals, then again at Andre, and only after that walked into the darkness of the winter forest, silently, majestically, as if dissolving into the snow. Andre was taken to the nearest city hospital. His condition remained critical: hypothermia, craniocerebral trauma, internal hematomas. For several hours, doctors fought for his life. He lay unconscious, and the merciless smell of antiseptic and sterile walls stood in the ward. It seemed this world was far from that icy forest where everything happened. But that was exactly where it all began. He woke up at night, not immediately. First, he heard the muffled sounds of monitors, then felt the weight on himself, the blanket, the air, his own body, and only then was able to open his eyes. Andre, he heard a familiar voice. It was his partner, Captain Ilan. "Damn, you're alive. We thought." He cut himself off. Andre tried to nod, but his body didn't obey. "Where are the dogs?" he whispered. Ilan blinked in surprise. "What dogs?" Witnesses said there were many animals, but when ours arrived, only tracks remained. Only tracks. They disappeared. Andre wanted to say that they didn't just disappear. They left just as they came, consciously, as if fulfilling their mission. The following days passed in a fog. Andre was examined, treated, his body temperature raised. His room became a repository of silence, where the only reminder of what happened were the scratches on his arms, traces of someone's paws, left not in battle, but in care. When he was first able to sit up on the bed independently, the doctor said, "It's a miracle you survived. With such hypothermia, people don't return. Animals warned you, there's no other way." Andre only smiled, weakly, but sincerely. A week later, the department chief visited him. He sat nearby, was silent for a long time, then said, "You understand that this case is now on everyone's lips. Both the police and the press are interested in one thing: what kind of pack is this?" Andre remained silent. People talk about wild dogs, former service dogs, lost animals, but such skills. The man shook his head. "It's impossible to explain." Andre whispered quietly, "It's possible." The chief raised an eyebrow in surprise. "I saw them closer than anyone. Those eyes, they knew what they were doing, but he didn't say the main thing, the sensation of recognition. As if once he had already stood next to such dogs, as if fate was not bringing him together with such defenders for the first time. No, as if these very dogs were already part of someone's life. Just not his, or was it his after all? An image from childhood flashed in his memory, a photograph of an old dog handler working with German shepherds. In the picture were puppies. Among them was the same look, the same intelligence, the same cold fire. Andrei shook his head. He didn't know what was real and what was the fruit of trauma. But one thing he knew for sure, the pack saved him not by accident. When he was discharged, Andrei insisted on returning to the scene of the incident. Doctors were indignant, colleagues tried to dissuade him, but he was adamant. And so he stood there again, on that very forest road where snow covered the tracks but couldn't erase the memory. The car was no longer there. The criminals had been taken away. The forest seemed quiet, too quiet. And suddenly, a crunch. Andrei turned around. In the shadow stood a silhouette. A dog, the very same large one, the leader. Slowly, confidently, he walked out onto the road, approached closer, stopped 3 steps away. His eyes shone with that same attentive light. Andrei exhaled. "You returned." The dog looked calmly, as if he wasn't afraid, as if he was waiting. And then Andrei saw movement in the depths of the forest. One silhouette, a second, a 10th, 20, a third. The pack was here, nearby, as if they wanted to make sure he was alive. And the leader took a step forward and tilted his head. In this gesture, there was something ancient: respect, recognition, gratitude. Andrei felt warmth unfolding in his chest. "Thank you," he whispered. "For everything." The leader slowly turned, and the pack disappeared into the forest just as quietly as they came. But Andrei knew, this was not the end. It was the beginning of something greater. The following days turned into a series of meetings, reports, news, interviews. The story about the pack of German shepherds that saved a policeman flew across the country. It was discussed, argued about, reports were filmed. But Andrei avoided journalists, didn't want to turn what happened into a sensation. He knew the dogs didn't come for glory. They came for a different reason. But which one? Every night he dreamed of their eyes, especially the eyes of the leader. They were so reasonable that sometimes Andrei woke up with the feeling that he had been talking to a living person. A week later he decided it was time to return to the forest. Time to find them again. Not for the press, not for the police, for himself. He walked along the same paths, wandering for hours between the trees. Sometimes it seemed he heard the crunch of paws, but looked around, no one. Only tracks on the snow, which disappeared just as suddenly as they appeared. But one day he found what he was seeking. On the edge lay an object, an old metal token. A police one, but not his. Engraved on it was the surname of a dog handler who died many years ago. The very one who trained German shepherds. The very one who was the mentor of Andrei's own father. Andrei froze. This couldn't be a coincidence. He brought the token to his face, and at that moment the forest seemed to come alive. Behind him, a familiar crunch rang out. The pack. The leader stood right in front of him, the others kept their distance. Andrei held up the token, and the dog slowly approached, sniffed the metal, then peacefully sat opposite, looking right into his eyes. "You knew him," whispered Andrei. "You knew my father. And found me." The dog blinked slowly, confirming, in the chest, something broke off. Andrei sat in the snow, not feeling the cold. The leader put a paw on his knee. The pack didn't simply save him. It was protecting a memory, passing on what a human couldn't finish, and now wanted a continuation. Andrei ran his hand along the dog's withers. "If you want me to go with you, show the way." The dog stood up. With a light push of his muzzle, he nudged Andrei's hand and turned toward the forest. And a journey began that changed everything. The place where the pack led him was the abandoned territory of an old K-9 base. Dusty, destroyed, but filled with traces. Scratches on trees, old commands that were still carried out as if from memory. And there, amidst those walls, Andrei realized, these dogs were the last students of his father, the last group he managed to raise. They survived, banded together in a pack, hid from the world, and came to him when he ended up on the brink. Not because he was a policeman, but because he was his father's son. Andrei returned home late at night. He wore the token now on his chest, and for the first time in many days, he felt not fear, not pain, but clarity. He knew his purpose. In the spring, Andrei officially submitted a report on the creation of a new unit, a search and rescue group based on German Shepherds. No one believed him until the pack itself walked out to the people. Calmly, confidently, as if they knew their time had come. Thus began a new story. Andrei became who his father was, a mentor, a protector, a connecting link between human and animal. The pack found a home again. Now they strengthened search operations, found the lost, prevented crimes. Andrei often returned to that winter forest. At the place where he once lay in the snow, the leader always sat nearby, as a reminder of life, of duty, of the fact that a saved life is a promise. And Andrei answered them every time, "I am with you now forever."